Okay, there we go. Hello and welcome everybody. This is Julie Ann of Influence Publishing. And right now I have Tom joining me. And so I'm going to use Tom as my example.
And actually, Julie, I'm sorry because it's coming up as Tom. I logged in on his as Chuck. You actually have Chuck of Chuck and Tom. So sorry about that. It's going to throw you for a loop because it's saying Tom, but it's actually Chuck. So.
Well, I'm glad you told me that now because I didn't want to be calling you Tom when you're not even Tom, you're Chuck. No. So we're going to be using Chuck as our live example of somebody that has heard from many people that they should be writing a book, that they've come to a time in their life where they're saying, I think I should be writing a book. People keep telling me I should be writing a book. And what do you do? Where do you go from here? So this is what this webinar is all about, is talking about the first steps to getting started with writing your book. So thank you, Chuck, for joining us so that I have a live victim to use as an example. So awesome. So, okay. So one of the first steps to writing a book is exactly what you have done right now, which is acknowledging that the time is right, acknowledging that now is the time where you're hearing this from people and your brain and your whole body is saying, I should be writing a book. I should be writing a book. You know, it's a big project. So I always say to people, you need to be really ready to write a book. You know, it's not something to be taken lightly. And it's also something that you need to think much bigger than just the book, because the main thing that will keep you motivated is understanding your why and why you want to write a book and what is the benefit to other people if you write a book. And then what are you going to do with that book beyond writing a book? So I'm gonna ask you some of these questions, Tom, and then we can start exploring that and see where we're gonna go with you. So why do you want to write a book?
I have a bunch of ramblings in my head that I go out and do runs or walks. It always goes through there, and I think I ought to capture this. I need to capture this. You know, I grew up in the South. I grew up in I'm 56 years old. I have a lot of ramblings and life history and interesting takes. And I've never approached a book, but like I said, I've done some blog posts and stuff like that. And a lot of people have found a lot of humor in my, I don't look at things in a normal way, in a normal light. I try to poke fun at everything, especially myself. And I would love to put this to paper or put this to some type of mechanism to save it and maybe share with others, and maybe others would get joy or entertainment, or understand that maybe they're not the only one that ever thought like this, that maybe Chuck from Austin, Texas originally thought like this. So who knows?
That's awesome. The most important thing, Chuck, is to think about like who you might benefit or who you might help by sharing some of those nuggets of your life. Because if we can just put the whole perspective of writing a book to the person that we're serving. So if you think to yourself, okay, who is actually going to read your book? Who would be interested in your book? And why would they be interested? So think about the things that you've done in your life and the obstacles that you may have overcome, or some of the challenges that you may have overcome, and how that might help other people. Okay. So can you think of what that might be, particularly in your situation with your life story? Who can you help and how can you help them?
I think I can help a lot of people because I've taken several chances in my life. I've gone on a limb and done things that, it's so easy for so many to dream, but a dream is always a dream unless you act upon it, unless you take steps to make it happen. And I look at my life, and especially now looking back 56 years in my life, I mean, I grew up in a very rural town in Georgia, and at the time of growing up, I never saw myself leaving that, and I left there to go to Austin, Texas to work for a startup. I didn't even know what a startup was, and spent 13 years at a startup, and it was a successful startup that actually got bought out by Comcast. and just the trials and tribulation of going from Georgia to there, and then to think, okay, you've gone to a successful startup, and then from that you sell everything, ditch everything, every material possession you had. You throw 3 dogs and a husband in the car and drive to Vallarta to open a guest house. You know, it's one of those things. It's like, I think many people may have dreamed it, but they always said, oh, hell no, I can't do this. And you can do anything. So.
Yes, and that's so timely right now, Tom. Tom, see, I'm going to keep reading your
It's
name.
Don't look through, don't block out the screen. So.
Yeah, that's very timely right now, because there's a lot of people that is a dream, right? And it's like to be able to read somebody else's story and see, no, this can actually be a reality and you can actually do it. And so a story like yours would be very inspiring. It would be very motivating. And maybe you can actually put some kind of tools and hints that people can actually go, oh, well, okay, I can take a similar path. Maybe I can take these steps. I can learn from your mistakes. I can learn from some of the things that you've done, and I can take a similar direction. So that in itself is a really good hot topic actually to focus on. I'm letting a few more people in right now. So there we go. Okay, so Ling, welcome. Where are you calling in from?
I am from Vancouver, Canada.
Very good. Very good. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I just had Dion. I think that's how you pronounce your name, Dion. You'll need to unmute if you want to. There you go. And you can turn your camera on as well if you want to. You don't have to. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm joining from my phone. So I just found the login. So thanks for your patience with me logging in.
Okay. That's good. So sorry, what was your name again?
Dion.
Dion. Okay, very good, Dion. I have to check because Tom is not really Tom. Tom is Chuck.
All right.
Excellent, excellent. So I was just saying to Chuck, a really important place to start when you're looking at the idea of writing a book is to ask yourself why you are going to be writing that book. Who can you actually help by writing that book, and how can you help them? Because if you can look at your story from the perspective of how can I serve somebody else? So somebody's going to read my book and somebody's going to say, oh, wow, I've always wanted to move to Puerto Vallarta. I've always wanted to escape the 9-to-5 and move to Mexico. But these are the reasons why I can't do it, or these are the reasons why I've not been able to do it. And Chuck can share his story. And by sharing his story, he can help people many ways. Just by telling his story, he's going to inspire people because he's there and he's doing it. He can motivate people because they'll be motivated to say, oh, wow, this person's actually done this. If I follow his footsteps, I can do it too. And he'll also has the opportunity to actually give some lessons. So to teach people, these are the mistakes I made, so don't make these mistakes. These are the things I wish I had done, so go ahead and do those things. And these are some of the things that you could benefit from. So, so let me start with Ling. Ling, do you know, do you have an idea of who you might be able to help by sharing your story?
I am not really, I'm putting together an imaginative story for movie, not really sharing my personal story. And the messages, the lessons really come from my life experiences. Mm-hmm. Kind of putting the messages of life, of wisdom about life that somehow God have placed me to go through a lot of trials and challenges to build me to be a stronger, wiser, better person. And I'm sharing all those life lessons that I learned along the way, also from teachers such as Oprah and a lot of other famous people like Steve Jobs, mm-hmm. Warren Buffett in the financial sense. So but then if I share it in a boring way, people don't want to buy the movie ticket, don't want to pay the movie ticket. So I'm going to make it so imaginative that when you learn the lesson, you don't even know you learn it, but it's just going to hit your heart and soul and then hit your head. Oh, this is sin. Oh my goodness, yeah. And somehow you have goosebumps. You don't know why you have goosebumps. Like yesterday, I was in an event sharing about the host was teaching me how to do testing on business, on your ads. And she was sharing her personal story. Seems like this is the style of a speaker.
Yes.
Share a touching personal story. She went through cancer and recovered. And I just put on the chat, she shared how worried she was. She had to go because she is a single mom. So now she's back to the bright side. So I just share the message that it just shows the truth that we can conquer the world, but we cannot conquer our fate. And then another attendant message saying, commented saying that it was powerful. So there was a lot of this kind of messages like never give up and peace surpass understanding, but not be aware of it.
This is what makes for a good movie. It's what makes for a good book. It's what makes for a good podcast. You know, it doesn't matter if you're sharing lessons from your life as your actual true life story, or if you are being creative and imaginative with it. What you're basically aiming to do is have people relate to you. So however you tell that story in a book, the first thing that people are going to say, or the first thing you want people to say is, oh, I know what she's saying. Oh, yes, I've definitely been there. I know exactly what she's talking about. Oh my goodness, I never thought about getting out of that situation that way. Oh, wow, if I'd only tried that myself, that would have been an awesome way of doing it. So a lot of the very successful movies are all based on the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is a psychological process that, psychologists use this process quite a lot to help people understand the journey in life. And, so you think about Star Wars, or Harry Potter, or any of the very successful movies, they all follow a story arc of the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is basically all about, somebody who is, they're living a very ordinary life, just like Chuck, living a 9-to-5 life. It's very boring. You suddenly realize, you have an epiphany. And you say, hang on a minute, is this my life? Is this what I'm going to live for the rest of my life? And so with that epiphany, you then make a move. You do something. You take a risk. You do something that's out of the ordinary, that's outside of the box, that's outside of your comfort zone. For Chuck, that was moving to Puerto Vallarta. It can be anything. Star Wars, Luke decides to leave, his planet and go off on another adventure. For Harry Potter, he trusts and he walks through the wall, gets on the train and he goes to the school. So it's the hero's journey it's that moment of epiphany where you say, oh my goodness, is this my life? I need to do something different. And then it's crashing through that comfort zone, that uncomfortable place where you are, where you're going to be taking a risk, you're going to be facing fears. And then you make that move. And then what usually happens in the hero's journey is the hero becomes a hero. He does some things to show that he has a gift. that, you know, he's on the right path. And then wham, something happens, right? Which is to challenge him, which is to say, hang on a minute, I'm not sure you're on the right path. You know, let's just re-examine this. And then the hero, the true hero, overcomes that challenge. And then he starts the cycle again. So he says, okay, I've done that challenge. I've now achieved everything I was going to achieve. I'm living the dream life. I'm doing what I want to do. Now what? And that's where Chuck is right now, right? So he came to Puerto Vallarta. He started a new life. He started a guest house, and now he's sold his guest house. He's now in a retirement stage, and he's going, now what? He's back into the same place. He's gone through the hero's journey cycle completely, and now he's back at the beginning again, which is the now what? What is the next challenge? What is the next thing that I should do, which goes outside my comfort zone, right? So it doesn't matter if that cycle of the hero's journey is a personal story, it's told as a personal story with a nonfiction, or it's told, as you're saying, Ling, in a fantasy story or a creative story, a fiction story. But that's usually a really good place to start. If you look at that whole cycle of the hero's journey, and you can look this up, there's a lot of references on Google about the hero's journey. If you look that up, all of you can use that as actually an outline to start your book. You can actually look at all the stages. I think there's like 7 stages of the hero's journey. And I bet all of you, and most people that are listening to this webinar right now, if you look at that, you will find that there's a way you can plot your story through those 7 stages of the hero's journey back to the beginning again. So certainly, Chuck, from what you've told me already, I can see that you're on your next cycle of the hero's journey. Does that make sense?
See, it does for me. Like I said, it's the reason I'm on this call today, I guess.
What about you, Dion? Are you on a hero's journey right now?
Yeah, you could say so. I think it's like an ever-going hero's journey. So I might as well give a little bit of background about me. I am in Puerto Vallarta. I'm from the UK. I've been here for about a year and a half, just over a year and a half. And I work in wellness right now. My background before was in corporate. And so I've basically came to wellness through recovering and healing a broken back without surgery. I've got a severe slippage in my spine. And I didn't really think it was a big deal. People started to tell me things like I should check out Joe Dispenza and things like that. For me, it was just very simple. I just didn't want to have surgery. I was petrified. And that took me on a journey. So I've had people asking me to share the story of my life. And I've had that. I've recovered from different things, obesity, sexual assault. So I'm working out started to write in terms of putting that into a book, but with purpose, like you said, like thinking who this will help, not just sharing my story. And so what has come through to me, and it ties in with the work that I'm doing now, is a self-help book around body image and trauma recovery that can really support both men and women. I have quite a lot of male clients actually that struggle with body image. And I used to joke about it. I'm 35 now, and I used to joke and say, okay, I'm tired of initiating men. Like I get into these relationships and make these men feel like they're incredible, and then it ends. Either they finish with me or I finish with them. But then I realized that was a real great blessing that I had to be able to have that impact in men's life. And it drew me to a pattern that actually men challenge with body image issues, but there's not as many resources or targeted focus on them as much as women. And even yesterday, I was speaking to this young man in India, and I remember I told him, I said, you know what, I'm going to tell you a secret. So I followed my intuition. I was like, the first time we met, I had a boyfriend, and he's in India, so I felt totally safe to say this. But I remember thinking, you're so handsome. I just want to let you know that. And he was like, are you serious? He said, I hate looking in the mirror. I avoid looking in the mirror. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. He said, no, I'm not kidding. I really struggle with
Wow.
my image. And I was thinking, this guy is so hot. How could he even think that? So, you know, and I just followed my intuition to give him that compliment. It's something that I practice more and more now in my work, is when I feel a compliment for somebody, to share it, and for people to learn to receive compliments and it not mean that they're going to jump to bed with you or something's going to happen. So
That's awesome. I love that, Deanna. And I love, you know, you really are living the hero's journey, right? You know, you've recovered, you've gone from corporate, you've moved into wellness, you've gone out of your comfort zone, you've taken the risk, you've now actually understood how you can help people. And, you know, this for a book, this is a great way to kind of launch what you're doing, because, you know, people buy from people they love and trust, right? So
Yeah.
if you share your life story and you help people to understand how you got out your comfort zone, how you moved through the sexual abuse, how you've moved through trauma, how you've moved through a broken back without having an operation, what you're sharing is your own personal hero's journey, but what you're really sharing is tools for people, right? And
yeah,
what that leads to is now for people to want to reach out to you. A lot of people don't realize that when you write a book, you've got to go to the end result first. A lot of people just think, I'm going to write a story and then it's going to sell, right? But what you've actually got to do is say, what is it that people want? Like, what are people going to want from me when they hear my story? If you start from that point, then what you're saying is, that's my end goal. This is what people need from me. And then you tell your story in that way to be able to deliver that to people. So in your case, Dion, you've just realized that you can help men with their body image. And this is like a kind of bit of a niche area, right? Because it's not that common. And so with that in mind, you can say, right, this is my target reader. This is the person that I actually want to help, that I know I can help. This is the person, this is the type of person that I keep being sent and I'm having a lot of success with. So I'm going to write my book with that person in mind. That's my target audience. That is the person that I'm writing my book for. And then you ask yourself, what does that person want to know? How does that person want to understand how I've gone through my hero's journey to get to the point where I have lots of self-confidence and they too can have self-confidence and self-esteem? So then you're actually going backwards with your book, and now you're creating your book with those steps and saying, this is what I'm going to deliver to that end user. So, you know, for you, Chuck, it might be, my target audience is a young man that's had challenges with talking about, you know, being gay, actually living outside the box, wanting to live in a different country, wanting to do a different thing, and all the worries and concerns and trauma that come with that. And so you can, and what would be the advice that you would give that young man that is now saying, what do I do? How do I overcome this? How do I come out? How do I move country? How do I start business in a different country? All these things. So if you think of that person, in fact, I always say, when you're writing a book, the very best thing you can do is actually imagine that person that's going to come up to you after they're holding your book in their hands, and they come up to you and they say, Chuck, thank you so much. I read this book and you changed my life. You really helped me to live the life that I want to live. Now, that's the person you're writing to. So have that person in mind as you start to think about your book. If you have that person, that end customer in mind, that end reader in mind, you can then ask yourself, what does that person want to know, right? That will give you more focus and more clarity about what part of your story you want to share. because we all have big stories, right? We have big life stories. Like we've got so many lessons and so many things, you know, Dion, just like you, I had my back broken, but actually in an operation. So I'm also from the UK. I had scoliosis at the age of 18. They decided to break my back to try and straighten my back. And I can tell my life story and talk all about that and the lessons I've learned from that and what that means. Or I can talk about, you know, traveling around the world, or I can talk about being a dyslexic publisher. You know, there's many stories I can tell, but I have to decide beforehand who is my audience and what story I'm going to tell, because otherwise I'm just going to get caught up in my story. Oh God, I can talk about being dyslexic. I can talk about having my back broken. I can talk about traveling around the world. I can talk about moving to Puerto Vallarta. I can talk about being a TED speaker. You know, there's all these things. And that's when we get very confused when we start writing our book. We're like, I want to do this. I want to do this. I'm going to include this. I'm going to, what do I do? This is why having a target reader is going to help you organize your book, and it's going to help you understand what part of your story you want to share, because you can't share it all. It's completely impossible. You know, that would be like a 400-page book, which people do, by the way, which is people come to me with a 400-page book. They've tried to write the whole story, and I'm like, no one's going to read that book. I'm really, really sorry to tell you that. But like, you know, here's a book that's this big, and it's all about your life. They want to know, well, how does it apply to me? Why should I write this book? Why should I care about your life? You know, my life's the important one. How are you going to help me? That's what people want to know, right? Whereas a lot of people make that mistake of writing a book about their story, their trauma, their problems, you know, their challenges. There's no problem with doing that. But what we actually want to know, what the reader actually wants to know, is how did you overcome it? What did you do to overcome that challenge? What were the mistakes that you made, and what would you do differently looking back on your life? So that's what the reader actually wants to know. That's where you need to really, really focus. And one way to do that is to mind map. So if you personally, the best way to mind map for me is you do it on a big flip chart piece of paper. You get big colored pens in your hand. You start in the middle and you write, you know, the first thing that comes to your mind. So let's just say, I'm going to use Chuck as an example because he's really easy to use as an example. So for Chuck, you would start with a mind map, and in the middle of the page, you would put, want to move to Puerto Vallarta, right? So that's in the middle of the page. And then what you would do is you would draw almost like a spider, which says, these are all the things that you did in order for you to move to Puerto Vallarta. So it would, maybe the first one is family. How did you deal with family? How did you tell the family that you were going to move? How did the family react to that? And then the next one might be money. What did you do about money? How did you think about you were going to make money in Puerto Vallarta? Do you have a mobile career, or did you have to change your career completely? And then the next circle might be logistics, right? Did you sell your house? Did you have a house? Did you drive down here? Did you drive in an RV? You know, how did you logistically make that move, right? And then the next circle might be lifestyle. Did you have to change your lifestyle? Did you have to change the way that you work? Did you have to change, you know, how much money you made? Did you have to change the way that did you have to go from working live to now working digitally? Lifestyle. And then culture, you know, that might be the next circle. How did you cope with the changing culture? How did you adapt to learning Spanish? How did you learn to adapt that you couldn't work at the same pace as you do in America, right? Because we're on Mexican time, right? We all know about that challenge. So you understand that you're mapping it out. You start with the main topic in the middle, and then you map out all the elements of what you actually did to get to where you are. And then you map also then the challenges that you had in each of those sections. So it would be like family. So there would be like a circle that would say family, and then you would have outside the family, you go, you know, dad was really upset with me, disowned me. You know, how did you cope with that? What did you do? How did you overcome that? Or did you overcome that? You know, so you then just break it down. So what you end up with is it's something that looks a bit like this. I'll get a piece of paper and show you guys. It's a brain dump, right? So there was a very famous author, and he said, the best way to write a book is to throw up and then to clean up, right? So you've got all those ideas in your head. You got to throw them all out, right? And then when you've thrown them all out, then you can go through and you can say, is this relevant to my reader? The person that I have now said is the person that's going to read my book. Is this particular part of my story relevant? So it's going to end up with, you're going to start here, right? That's your move to PV, right? And then it's going to have all these different sections. Family, let's say like this, money, here, culture, what else did I say? Lifestyle, right? So it's going to look like this. And then from the family, you're going to have all the elements of that. So telling your story, dad, and the challenges there, telling the story about logistics of, like, say, seeing family, and how did you overcome that, etc. So for each one of those areas, you then go into detail, okay? And then as you go into detail, you think about your reader, right? So you might go back through that and you say, well, you know what, for my reader, it's not really relevant for me to start talking about, you know, how my dad got really upset with me and we had this big argument, and, you know, maybe that's not relevant. So I'm just going to cross that out and say, actually, no, that doesn't belong in the book, right? So that's the cleaning up part, right? So the mind dump is that you just dump here on a big piece of paper all the ideas that you have for your book. And then the cleaning up part is you go through and you say, is this relevant? Is my reader going to be interested if I share this particular story? And if I do share this particular story, how am I going to share it in a way that it would be helpful to them, right? And Ling, for you, it's the same thing. Even though it's a fiction book, this is how you can create your story by doing this, right? So you can actually, it doesn't matter. Now all you've got is you create fictional characters around these story, around this same story. But basically, it's a very simple way of getting started on the book. You basically map the hero's journey, then you mind map your story to the hero's journey, and then you go through in detail and say, does my reader want to know this? Is it relevant to my reader? Okay. Who has questions so far? Anybody got questions?
I guess you said throughout, it's just brainstorm everything, and then you just organize it. And you can't do everything. So you will have to get rid of the irrelevant or not necessary info, and only put the most relevant and vital info. Because yeah, I won't buy a book that very thick, because I have no patience to go through it. So I think, yeah, people make a mistake. Unless Donald Trump, you know, biography that you want to, I mean, if he has a lot of life experiences, maybe he write a very thick book and put everything there, and people, his fans will buy it. I won't buy it because I just don't have patience to. I think average people don't put like everything in a big book, then people think, no, it's too much. You know, like some people like buffet, some people don't. So you have to, yeah, as you said, you have to think about your audience, what they want.
Exactly. And you can always write more later, right? So this is a conversation I started to have with Chuck just before the rest of you joined me, was you have to think about what is next, right? It's not the book that sells, it's the author that sells. This is the biggest mistake that everybody makes. They think they can write a book and then they sell the book. Wrong. You write a book and then you sell yourself, right? They are buying you. They're buying your knowledge. They're buying your wisdom, right? So you can't stop at the book. This is something, particularly older people, they think they can write a book and it's leaving a legacy. That's it. There you go. I've left my legacy, right? And that's my motivation. That's why I'm doing this. I'm leaving a legacy. Sorry, that's not good enough. People are still going to want you in some form, right? Even if it is that they go to your website and they can read the rest of the story on your website, so if you have written blogs, you've written articles, you've got photographs of your life, we've all got some form of a content that exists already, right? So the reader wants more of you. They're going to read your story. They're going to go, wow, this is an amazing story. I really, really, really want to speak to Dion about this. I want to know, like, how did she do that? Like, how did she heal without having to have an operation? Oh God, I really need to meet this woman. I really need to know more information. Oh my God, how do I get hold of her? There's no information in this book. Like, who is this Dion? Where is she? How can I get hold of her? So you've got to think beforehand, how are they going to continue that relationship with you? Are you going to have a website? Are you going to have a Facebook page? Are you going to have a Facebook group so that people can actually personally interact with you? Are you going to be available for individual coaching sessions? Are you going to have a webinar? Are you going to have an active group? All these things. This is the way that people want to engage with you. And that's how you become successful with your book. People buy from people. People don't buy stories, they buy people, right? So you have to be available. You have to say, you got to think it through and say, what's next? Chuck, you're in a beautiful position where you can help so many people that have just arrived in Puerto Vallarta. Being here, and Dion, that too, that there's a lot of people that have just arrived in Puerto Vallarta. They're trying to find a way to make a living. They're trying to get settled. They're trying to navigate the culture shock. They're trying to figure out, all the things that you've done, right? So even Chuck, even if you just had a meetup, a meetup once a week for new arrivals meetup, that would be so helpful for people. You write your book, and then your follow-up for people is that you have a, once a week meetup, a coffee chat, or you have a Facebook group where people can interact and they can come and ask you questions. Oh my God, Chuck, how did you possibly start a guest house? Did you have to get a work permit? What did you do about that? Are you a resident? How did you do that? Do you have to pay taxes? How do you do that? All those things that they're thinking about and they're wondering about, they can come to you and ask you. And of course, you can charge for your help, right?
Sure.
So you don't have to be retired. You can just say, okay, I don't want to start a whole corporate business, but hey, I can help people and they can pay me for their help. So, I can coach them individually. We can just have a coffee chat. I can do a freaking arrive in Puerto Vallarta 1 hour class, right? You can come here, Chuck, to this Casa de Influencia, and you can have a meeting, right, once a week for people, or you can have a workshop or a class, or it's practical. People think about books and stories and they think, that's it, I've written the book, that's it, now it's got to sell. No. You're the one that they want. They want you because you've done it. You've been there and you've achieved it. So you can't just write a book. You have got to think about the end goal. Who is your customer and how are they now going to engage with you after you've written the book, right? So this is where you think of the book is like your brand, right? people buy from people that we love and trust. Ling, if you want to sell your movie to movie producers, they want to know why you, and what are you going to do for your audience after that, after you've sold your movie? How are you going to be available, right, to make another movie? Or how are you going to be available to connect with your audience? That's what they want to know, right? So you are not going to sell that movie, and you're not going to get producers interested in that movie unless you actually show who you are in the world, where you are in the world, and how people can interact with you. Because nobody's interested in buying writing. They're not interested in buying a book just for the sake of a book. The only people that can do that are people that have already proven themselves, like, well-known writers, and that they have made a living and a reputation from just that job. Stephen King did not become famous or did not make a living out of writing a book or gained the respect until he put his 10,000 hours in. I don't know if you know about that whole premise, that to become an expert, you've got to put your 10,000 hours in. So, Chuck, you put your 10,000 hours in, right? You've been here for 4 years. You've lived that for 4 years. You are sharing your 10,000 hours of experience. Dion, you are sharing your 10,000 hours of experience of trauma and of back operation. You're sharing that 10,000 hours of knowledge. Ling, we need to know, where's your 10,000 hours of experience? We want to know who you are, why you know what you know. Why should we buy a movie from you? Why is your life so interesting, right? So we need to know that. And if you're writing a pitch deck for movies to get people interested in Hollywood and producers interested in your movie, you got to sell yourself, right? That's what you've got to sell, not your movie idea. They don't give a shit about your movie idea. Sorry, but it's the truth. They want to know who you are, right? Who are you? And why are you an expert to be able to do what you're doing, right? It's not just that I'm so creative and I have fantastic ideas. So do I. But, unless you can show that you've put the 10,000 hours in, that you've got that knowledge and you've got that experience, it's going nowhere. So I like to be totally honest about this when it comes to the reality of writing a book. It's a big deal. It might take a year, it might take 2 years. I have a process where I can help people do it in 5 months. That's the fastest I've done this in terms of helping people write books. And it can totally be done in 5 months. I mean, basically you just divide, you do the outline first, like I showed you with that mind map, so that you've got your story arc of the hero's journey. And then you divide that into chapters, right? So you say, okay, I'm going to make a commitment to write every day 500 words. That's 2 pages, right? So 500 words, 2 pages a day. In 10 days, that's 5,000 words. In 20 days, that's 10,000 words. In 30 days, what's that? I've lost count. Anyway,
words.
It's a lot of words. In 2 months, you can write the first draft of your book, okay? If you commit to every day only writing 2 pages, right? But in order to write 2 pages, you need to know what you're going to write. No good writer just goes to their writing pad first thing in the morning and just writes and writes. Well, you can do that. That's called journal writing. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? You can get a lot of good material from your journal writing, but that means it's going to, you've now got to, work through all those journal notes to find your story. A lot easier if you plan it beforehand and then you say, okay, these are my main topics. It might just be that these little side bubbles become your chapter titles, okay? That's one way of doing this. When I help people with the mind map, I often do this. I often have the mind map, and when we do the cleaning up part, we go through and we mark the mind map, and then from this, we create a chapter plan, right? And then these little things off the sub bubble become the subtitles within the chapter. So then when you write this out, you end up with all the chapters and all the subtitles for each chapter. And then you say, okay, every day, 500 words. This one, right? And then you don't even have to write your book in order. All right. Now I want to, we don't have much time, but I want to address one of Chuck's questions about how do you do this? How do you write, right? If I'm not a good writer, how am I going to write a book? And one of the methods that I use to help people is to point out that your job as an author is to tell a good story. It is the editor's job to make you a good writer, okay? It's the editor that has the experience of grammar, has the experience of spelling and sentence structure and flow and all those things that you don't have to be an expert in. As an author, you are an expert in storytelling. So let go right now of all the objections that have anything to do with grammar, spelling, sentence structure, anything, language. English is not my first language. I don't know how to write. I don't care. That's why you have a good editor. They can take your words and they can make it really great. This is how I succeed as a dyslexic publisher. I am dyslexic. I did a TED talk on the topic of dyslexia, right? And I'm a book publisher. I have published over 300 authors and made many of them bestsellers. How have I done that if I'm dyslexic? Because it's not my job to do the editing. I'm a publisher. I'm not an editor. They're completely different jobs, right? A publisher is somebody that helps you get the right topic, that helps you get the theme, that helps you identify who your audience is and make sure that you write to that audience. The editor is somebody who makes your writing really good. So don't even think about writing a book unless you're committed to paying for an editor, right? That you cannot miss that step. Anybody who says, oh, my best friend's an English teacher, she'll be able to help me. It's not an editor. Just because you're an English teacher does not mean to say that you know anything about books. A book editor is somebody that isn't just looking for your grammar and spelling. They are looking at the flow of the content, the structure of the book, the sentence structure, your paragraph structure, like it's language that helps turn your story into a book. So don't get those things mixed up, right? And don't think that you can do all those jobs yourself, because you can't. And nor does any good author do that. You know, you look at anyone like Stephen King, for example, he writes his dreams. That's what he does. That's the only thing he does. He has dreams, he writes them down, and then he passes them to an editor. And it's the editor that basically makes his writing really good. And it's his script writer that makes them into movies. Stephen King doesn't do that. He doesn't write his own scripts, right? His raw words, his raw story goes to a script writer. That's how they become movies, right? Okay, who's got questions?
I'm not a script writer. I'm going to hire a script writer to put it all together, just like what you said. Chuck, but you can definitely look into writing, hire someone to put together like a short ebook. Just say 10 things you don't want to do when you first move in here, or 10 things you have to do when you first move in here, or 10 things you must know before you set up a guest house or or Airbnb or whatever. You know, those are easy. 10 things. You have the experience that I don't. You know the place, your country, I don't. So I buy it if, you know, like $5, $3.50. buy it and just take a look, right? Or you just got divorced. 10 things you must do after divorce. Oh, people, okay, I just got divorced. What are the 10 things I
But
must
you know, Ling, to be really truly successful with that and have people actually want to buy that ebook is that first you have to establish why you're an expert, right?
Yeah, that's
It is a mistake that people make, that they think that they can just like upload the 10 things for this or 10 things for that. And you know that you're knowledgeable, you know you have that knowledge, but the person that's buying the book does not know you from anybody else. And this is the biggest problem with ebooks, is that there's no quality control. Anybody can upload 10 top things to do when you go to Puerto Vallarta and sell it for 99 cents. But that's not going to get you anywhere, because basically anybody can do that. So it's not showcasing your experience. It's not showcasing your wisdom. It's not showcasing your 10,000 hours. Like, sure, you can just give that knowledge away, but unless you actually showcase who you are and why you can give that information, it just becomes a 99-cent ebook that's going to be bought by 99 cents by a few people, right? It doesn't really do anything, right? It's not really serving the world, because there's no connection, and we don't know why you're an expert, why you know those top 10 things. So it is a good idea to get you started, but it's actually better to do it the other way around. Do your book first, write your story. People buy from people we know and trust, remember? So you got to tell them why they should know and trust you first. Then they can relate to you, and then they'll go, wow, this is somebody who knows this stuff. They've put in their 10,000 hours. I actually respect this person. I'm not only am I going to buy their book, I'm going to take a personal coaching session from them, or I'm going to go to their webinar or their class or their, or Dion, I'm going to take a personal session from you, a coaching session. So this is why, for me, that's why I say, if you're going to write a book, please take it seriously, because you only have one chance to make a first impression. So use that opportunity. Don't blow your first impression by, uploading, 50-page ebooks here, there, and everywhere, because you can actually lose your credibility that way, because we're like, who is this person? So it's much better for you to spend the quality time on sharing your knowledge and make the most of it. Everybody here that's on this webinar, and I'm betting most people that actually are listening to this webinar, are people that have put in the 10,000 hours. They've put in the 10,000 hours. So share it and tell people what you've done with your life and why you're an expert. And then they want to listen to you, and then they want to engage with you, and then they want to give you a movie deal, Ling, because they can see who you are, right?
I have a couple of questions, Julie.
Yes.
So I just want to also just clarify that I heard right. So what I'm hearing is that it's good to have the book, write the book, focus on that, maybe 5 to 12 months. And then to promote the book, we need to really promote ourselves. And there's ways that you can do that with like short, you didn't say this, but I think like short articles online, if you can find platforms in like related to the subject and just end it with, I've got a book, or events in personal, online, or private sessions. And I can't remember if you said like giving a taster of a chapter is a good way, because I remember when I buy books off Amazon and I can just, I don't really read it, but just knowing that they'll let me flick through the contents at least, it gives me that ease of mind to want to order that book. Do you think that's a good way to
Yes. So when you write a book, because you've spent a lot of time on this, you want to basically repurpose that content as many ways as possible. So you can take your chapters that you've written and you can take excerpts from the chapters, you can turn them into articles. You can take excerpts or quotes from your chapter and use them as Facebook posts, for example. You can take a, let's say, a lesson that you have got in your book, and you can turn it into an Instagram post, right? With some great tool or lesson. You can turn your whole book into a workshop, right? So you can actually take your chapters, take that, all the tools and things that you're going to share, and you can turn it into a workshop. So I always say, whilst you're actually developing the content for your book, do it with the idea that you're going to be creating other content. You're going to be turning it into a movie, right? You're going to be turning it into a podcast. You're going to be turning it into an audiobook. You're going to turn it into a webinar. You're going to turn it into a workshop. You're going to turn it into a Facebook group with interactive quotes and excerpts. I mean, once you've written the content, just keep repurposing that content all over the place, right? And that's why here in Puerto Vallarta, I've created this co-creation hub so that you can do exactly that. So for Chuck and Dion, you come here anytime. That's what we're here for, is to help you create content, not only from a book, but then repurpose it into podcasts and into video and into a workshop and curriculum and webinars and movies and documentaries and radio shows. And it goes on and on. But first you got to create the content, right? So that's why you've got to make the most of your knowledge and your experience. Anybody have other questions? Because we're about to at the end of our hour. So is there any more questions that you wanted answered?
I have one question. How come some people say they can sell the book without even started to writing it? How does that work?
Question that I have.
It doesn't.
Actually, well, Julie, you might be able, on a connected to that, I put a post saying that I'm writing a book, and people have asked if they can support. Now, people say that I'm a good writer, right? And I hear you, and I believe that even if I'm good at editing, that I still should have an editor because I'm too close to the material. But I really feel that it's a great opportunity if I could get, I don't know, Patreons, I'm not on the platform, or people that are willing to sponsor me, to pay for my editor, to pay for my publisher, to pay for my marketer. Like, you know, you never know who, especially if I'm doing workshops or teaching my day-to-day job here, people might donate and say, if I'm transparent and say, I want to write this book, it's not a free thing, it is going to cost me these. And then you could have maybe a page where people can donate, and then they can get a signed copy or something, or a special price of the book. Do you think that's a good idea? And then it's kind of paying for the book itself, and you're selling it before.
There's lots of things you can do, Dion, to actually raise money for the book as you write it. You can't, it's like people won't donate to you if they don't know why they should be donating, right? So they need something to show what your expertise is all about. So for example, let's say you started, as you're writing the book and you're creating content, you start to create some tools and things that help people, right? You can start sharing that information on Facebook or, you know, on a meetup group or whatever. But what you really want to do is connect with people that connect with your audience. So let's say, for example, you connect with a group which is chronic pain, for example, a chronic pain group, right? Now, a group like that, you can just start interacting with them, like in their group, giving some hints, giving some information, starting to share your expertise for free. Once they can see that you are an expert and you do know, you've put in your 10,000 hours, then you can start telling them about your idea of a book. And you can start getting some support from them by placing a pre-order. So you're not asking them to sponsor you, or you're not asking them to donate. You're saying, I'm willing to share my expertise with this group because there's many people in this group that need help. I'm willing to share that. If you're willing to take a risk on me and pre-buy the book for $20, right? And then you've only got to probably sell, you know, like, let's say 50 books, and you've raised the money there for your editor, right? So that is a much better way of doing it, but always you need to show who you are first. People are not going to donate to you or sponsor you until they know why and who you are and what your expertise is. So you have to do what I'm doing here. I'm doing a free webinar. I've been in business for 11 years. I've published over 300 authors, but I'm giving away my information for free, right? So people can see I'm an expert, right? You're listening to me, and hopefully Chuck and Dion, you'll come and join my writers group here at Puerto Vallarta, and we can get to know each other better. And eventually you might say, hey, Julie, I'd like you to help me work with my book, or maybe connect me with one of your editors or whatever. But you've got to be there to give away that information first. Because if you don't, why would they buy from you? Why would they sponsor you? Why would they donate to you? So you got to put the hours in first to actually earn the respect from people. And then they'll go, yeah, this person really knows their shit. They've lived it. They've worked their 10,000 hours. They've got the knowledge. I'm willing to, buy that book up front to help them out. So yeah. So anybody got last minute questions? Because we're at the top of the hour, well, past the hour. So anybody got any questions? Okay. So if you want to stay connected with me, you can send me a Facebook request. My Facebook name is Julie Ann on Facebook, Julie Ann. I'm in Puerto Vallarta. I look exactly like my picture on Facebook, so you should be able to find me. And my website is influencepublishing.com. And I respond to Messenger. For you, Chuck and Dion, in Mexico, you can WhatsApp me. That is 322 for Puerto Vallarta, 105-5517. That is 322-105-5517. That's for WhatsApp. And if you are listening to this and you're in Puerto Vallarta, I will be starting a weekly meetup for writers in Puerto Vallarta. There'll be no charge. I'm just doing this to gather people together and to connect people that have just either recently moved to Vallarta or they've been here a while, like myself and Chuck. But I'm really just here to connect people. So Casa de Influencia is in Centro. We're just below the Mirador Lookout. So we're very, very central. We're only 5 minutes walk from the Malecon. And if you reach out to me, you can also email me, which is founder@influencepublishing.com. And let's stay connected, and let's start gathering all our writers in Puerto Vallarta, and let's start connecting and helping one another. I'd love to do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I hope to see you too, and anybody else that's in Puerto Vallarta. And Ling, stay connected with me on Facebook, and I'll let you know any other free webinars or other courses and things that I'll be making available to people.
That's good. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody,
everyone.
for coming. Okay. Bye.